So I've been in the fashion industry for 23 years now, and for 18 of those years, I run my business. Now, one of the things that I do when I'm hiring a new member of staff, specifically someone that's in my technical team, is that I will give them three technical tasks to do. And that would ultimately be the first round of me interviewing them to see if they're worth going through to the next stage. Uh, Now, I've probably been sewing. Yeah, I've been in the fashion industry for 23 years, and I've been sewing for all of those 23 years very intensely. So most cases when I hire someone that's going to be part of the technical team, 9 times out of 10, they're actually older than I am. Um, so one of the first, well, there's three tasks that I'll give them to do. The first of those three tasks is a pin hem. Now it's about like a 2 to 3 millimeter width hem that is generally done in two stages. The first stage is you'd obviously mark out, like if it's on chiffon or silk, you'll mark out where the hem needs to be and potentially do what's called like a holding stitch. That's if the fabric doesn't kind of behave itself. But the way I would do it is I would do a 0.5 centimeter fold and do a very fine, like a 1 centimeter edge stitch, and I'll use probably a size 70 needle, and the stitch length would be about maybe 2 millimeters, and I'll do that stitch consistently all the way across the edge of the hem. And I'll then take my time and snip off all of the excess on that hem. So I've literally kind of got 2 millimeters of folded fabric. And the next stage is, well, some machinists, they will press the second phase of the kind of hem folded in. But I will just jump straight into folding it. But then the key thing is I'll leave a bit of a tail in the thread, so that I can kind of coax the fabric along so it doesn't get stuck underneath the presser foot. So then I'll do my second hem stitch on top of that first one. And by that time, all the raw edge is hidden away. So if I can see that they can do a pin hem on that kind of fabric, then I know that, we're going in the right direction. Because a lot of the stuff I do, it requires not only a pin hem, but it requires a certain level of attention to detail. And even if, you're not doing a pin hem, it's a test of seeing how much it can take time and execute these kind of tasks. The next task that I'll give them to do is a French seam, and I'll purposely cut the French seam on a bias to make it twice as hard. Now, for those of you that don't know what a French seam is, it's a seam that is kind of hidden away. It's done in two stages. I've always thought that the way I can be lifelong rich is invent a machine that does a French seam. But yeah, so it's a French seam where you stitch the wrong sides together, but you do like a 5 millimeter stitch first. And this is if you've got a 1 centimeter seam allowance. So the first stage is you stitch 5 millimeters on your seams, and then pretty much like the pin hem, you'd cut away the excess. So you'd leave about 2 millimeters of raw edge left on that stitch line. And then this is probably where you'd want to go to the iron. You'd fold it inside so that now the whole seam is in reverse, and then you would sew the other 0.5 centimeter to close off that seam, so the raw edge is sandwiched inside the seam. Again, most times that's done on chiffon, that's done on silk. It's generally lightweight fabrics. You wouldn't do a French seam on a heavyweight fabric. And because it's on a bias, anyone that sews knows that when the fabric is on a bias grain, that diagonal grain, it's got its own kind of mind. So you have to try twice as hard to control the fabric, because you don't want the seam to stretch. You want it to, if you've got a seam that is, I don't know, measures 50 centimeters when you started, you want it to measure 50 centimeters by the time you finish that French seam. So that's the real test. The third and final test, which I think is the hardest actually, is doing an invisible zip, because most cases you do get garments that require the normal open-ended or close-end exposed zip, which they're not easy to do, but they're pretty much anybody can do them. But if you can do if you can sew an invisible zip on a lightweight fabric, and then what I also tell them to do is bind that zip, then if you've completed those 3 tasks, then you are worthy of me hiring you for a trial day within my business. Now, because I've worked in a lot of luxury fashion houses, from Alexander McQueen to Roland Mouret to Victoria Beckham, these were things that I actually learned how to do pretty early on in my career. So by the time I got hired by these places, these are the kind of things that they're doing on a day-to-day basis. So if you can't do these things properly, you almost have to be able to do it secondhand. If you can't do it properly, then you're not going to last. And regardless of whatever I'm sewing within my business, I want the same level of standards from any of my technicians. So after they've done those first 3 key tasks, then I will hire them in for a full day paid trial, where I will get them to make one of my garments from start to finish. And then if they can pass that test, then I'm able to give them a full-time contract within my business.